The veteran sat alone in the quiet church, the first light of morning slipping through the stained-glass windows and resting on a small white feather in his palm. The feather seemed to hold its own glow, edges marked with faint brown scars that told a story he was only now beginning to understand. He closed his fingers around it gently, as if it might disappear if he held it too tightly. Beside him, on the wooden bench, lay a folded note, the date on it one he never expected to see again. His breath slowed, eyes locked on the feather, a realization settling into the stillness around him. Something important had come back to him, something he thought he lost long ago. But how it returned was a truth still waiting in the shadows. He began the day the way he always did. He unlocked the old church door, feeling the familiar weight of the key in his hand, and pushed it open to let in the cold morning air. He swept the dust along the aisle in slow, steady strokes, the sound echoing softly through the empty hall. He straightened the hymn books, aligning each one the way he had done for years, making sure every row looked the same. The silence wrapped around him like an old coat, comforting but heavy, carrying a quiet ache he never spoke about. He lit a single candle near the altar and watched the thin trail of smoke rise toward the wooden beams above. Everything felt ordinary, unchanged, predictable. But that morning, one small thing shifted everything. He heard it before he saw it, a faint rustle followed by a soft thud near the back pew. He assumed it was just a loose piece of plaster or a fallen hymn sheet. But when he stepped closer, the sight made him pause. A dove lay on its side, its wing twisted at an unnatural angle, its small body rising and falling in shallow, uneven breaths. Dust clung to its feathers, and thin lines of scratches ran across its wings, as if it had struggled against something rough. When he picked it up, it felt far too light, almost weightless in his hands, as though life was slipping through it. He noticed a faint smear of dried clay on its claws, a reddish tint that didn't match anything inside the church. He turned it gently, searching for a tag or thread, but there was nothing. Only that strange clay. Something about it felt wrong, disturbingly familiar, tugging at a memory he wasn't ready to face. He brought the injured dove to the front bench and laid it gently on a soft cloth, trying not to cause it more pain. The morning light revealed more than he expected. The dried clay on its claws wasn't random. It had the same reddish tint as the soil behind the church cemetery, a shade he knew well from years of tending the grounds. As he brushed along one of its wings, something small flaked off. A tiny fragment of old paper clung to a feather, brittle and yellowed with age. He lifted it carefully. There was a half-faded date written in uneven ink, and the broken start of a handwritten line he couldn't fully read. He stared at the clues, feeling a familiar pull in his chest. Was it all just coincidence, a strange mix of details carried in by chance? Or was he overlooking something waiting to be understood? That thought unsettled him more than he expected. He stepped outside and circled the church grounds, checking the cemetery path, the rear fence, and the old tool shed. Everything seemed undisturbed, untouched by anything unusual. No signs of broken earth, no scattered feathers, nothing to explain the clay or the paper. 2 clues sat in his mind, but none of them formed a straight line yet. His first lead took him straight to the cemetery, behind the church. He walked each row slowly, expecting to find loose soil or a trail where an animal might have dragged itself. But every grave was neat, untouched and still. The earth looked the same as it had the week before, firm and undisturbed. Even the reddish clay near the edges didn't quite match the shade he found on the dove's claws. He exhaled sharply, feeling a little foolish for letting his thoughts run ahead of him. Maybe it really was just an injured bird that had found shelter inside the church. Maybe he was searching for meaning where there was none. He turned to leave, ready to put the mystery aside, when something caught his eye. Beneath the old memorial plaque, half tucked into a crack in the stone, a single white feather fluttered gently in the breeze. Its edge was marked with the same brown scar pattern he had seen on the dove's wing. Too specific to ignore, too familiar to dismiss. A dead end, but one tiny clue refused to let go. The feather beneath the plaque pulled at something deep inside him, a memory he had spent years trying not to revisit. It took him back to his final days in uniform when life felt uncertain and every goodbye carried weight. Before he left, he had stood in this church with someone he trusted more than he ever admitted. They had written a small paper note together, a quiet promise folded once and tucked carefully behind a stone cross near the altar. He had meant to return for it, to keep his word, but life had swept him in a different direction. By the time he came back after service, the note was gone. He searched for it more times than he could count, until he finally convinced himself it had blown away, destroyed by weather or time. But the words spoken that day never left him. Some things come back when you're ready. He had carried that line through years of silence, through the ache of leaving and the weight of returning. And now, standing there with the feather marked by the same scars as the injured dove, he felt that old promise stir again. And now, something felt like it was coming back. He brought the dove back inside and set it gently on the bench once more. As he smoothed its feathers, something he had missed before appeared under the soft white layers. A faint trace of ink, almost rubbed away, as if it had once pressed against damp writing. He leaned closer. The marks curved in the same direction as the torn fragment of paper he had found earlier. When he held the fragment beside the feather, the edges matched, like pieces of a puzzle trying to fall back into place.
He cleaned the dried clay from the bird's claws with slow, careful strokes. As the reddish dust fell away, he recognized the shade more clearly. It wasn't from the cemetery at all. It matched the older soil behind the chapel's storage room, a place he hadn't visited in years. That room had always been cold, filled with forgotten boxes and old documents that no one bothered to check anymore. He made his way to the back, opened the door, and felt the stale air breathe out toward him. On a lower shelf sat a worn registry book covered in dust. He flipped through it, page after page, until a date caught his eye. The same date that appeared on the fragment stuck to the dove's feather. The same date from the promise he thought was gone. Piece by piece, the trail began to form a single path. The feather, the ink, the clay, the date. Everything pointed to one forgotten corner of the church. Everything now pointed to a single truth. He stood in front of the small back room, the dim hallway stretching behind him like a quiet reminder of every unanswered question he had left untouched. His hand hovered over the cold metal latch, hesitant, unsure. What if he was wrong again? What if all these signs were just scattered pieces he was forcing into a story that didn't exist? A part of him feared the truth might cut deeper than the years he had spent trying not to look back. But another part, the part that had carried that old promise through silence and distance, would not let him walk away. He drew in a slow breath, steadying himself. Whatever waited behind that door, he needed to face it. I need to see it, whatever it is. He pushed the latch and stepped inside. The room was dim, its air thick with the smell of old wood and forgotten seasons. Dust floated in thin beams of light that slipped through the narrow window, drifting slowly like tiny ghosts suspended in time. Near the far wall sat a small wooden box, one he had not seen since the years before he left. The lid was slightly ajar, and around it lay faint white feathers scattered across the floor, as if placed there gently by something that understood their meaning. He knelt and lifted the box with careful hands. The wood felt fragile, aged, carrying the weight of memories he had avoided for too long. When he opened it, His breath caught. Inside lay the original note he had thought the wind had stolen or the years had destroyed. The same handwriting curved across the page, soft and familiar. The same promise waited beneath it, untouched. And the same date he had seen on the fragment clung to the corner, unmistakable after all this time. He read the words slowly, letting them settle into him. The clues fell into place one after another. The clay on the dove's claws matched the soil behind this room. The faint ink on its feathers had come from resting against the old papers inside the box. The dove had stumbled, not randomly, but near the exact spot where the note had been hidden long ago. The person who wrote the note had rescued injured birds often, leaving feathers as quiet symbols of hope. He remembered watching them tend to every small creature with a gentleness he admired. He realized now that the dove's fall was not an accident. It was a message, years late but perfectly timed, a reminder he was finally ready to receive. The truth wasn't grand, and it wasn't dramatic. It was simply, deeply real. He walked back to the front pew with slow, steady steps, the feather resting in his hand just as it had at the beginning of the morning. The soft light from the stained glass windows caught its edges again, turning the white into a gentle glow. But this time, he understood what that glow meant. He sat down, placed the note beside the feather, and let his fingers trace the familiar handwriting he had once feared was lost forever. The quiet of the church no longer felt heavy. It felt full, as if something long delayed had finally reached him. He whispered the old promise under his breath, letting the words settle in the air. Some things do not vanish. Some things return when the heart is finally ready to receive them. The moment made sense now. The past had circled back. Not everything that disappears is truly gone. Some things wait quietly in the background of our lives until the moment we are ready to see them again. As the morning light warmed the empty benches, the feather rested on the wood without moving, calm and certain, as if it had finally completed its journey. He folded the note with care, feeling its familiar weight settle into his hand. No longer a fragment of the past, but something returned, something whole. Sometimes the smallest signs carry the greatest truths.